Hello and welcome to the Rays of Hope program, brought to you by the Purchase Area Sexual Assault and Child Advocacy Center. I'm your host, Mary Foley. Thank you so much for joining me. I'd like to get right to our guest today. Angie York serves as the Director of Education for the center, and there are so many new exciting things going on in the prevention arena, and I would love for you to take just a brief moment, tell the viewer who you are, and let's get right to the content today.
Okay, well, my name, like you said, is Angie York, and I'm the Director of Education at the center. And I have spent a great deal of time the last year in Frankfort talking about, learning about, and deciding on what is going to be our one project that we teach throughout the state of Kentucky in the realm of prevention as far as it concerns to domestic violence and sexual abuse and sexual violence. And that program that we have chosen is called the Green Dot Program. So we spent many months getting to this program. We actually met in Frankfort, a group of educators and executive directors from across the state. We've met and discussed and read.
Rediscussed.
Yes, definitely, and rediscussed. And looked into what's going to be the best thing that we, the 13 rape crisis centers, can do for our state as far as preventing abuse from happening in the first place.
And Angie, I want to interrupt you just quickly so that you can just tell the viewer, because I think you and I know so much about this, we've talked about it, we've heard about it, but I want to interrupt you right there to just allow you to explain to the viewer why the state of Kentucky even thought about changing its prevention program, and how the Center for Disease Control nationally, how they had a role in that. So give us a little bit of history before we get right into the Green Dot program.
Okay, well, basically how that works, we are funded in part by the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, and they started this development of a prevention program. They wanted to move to sole prevention instead of just awareness. And in doing that, they chose 5 particular states to kind of be a pilot program. Kentucky was not one of the chosen states.
Right.
But we have such great leaders at our state office at KSAP, the Kentucky Association of Sexual Assault Programs. They wanted to be involved and did so. They went in as kind of a 6th component, but did not get paid for that. They just went in on their own. And so that allowed them to get all the information that the pilot programs were getting, but they were able to have a little more leniency. They didn't have to follow all of the guidelines that were set forth by the CDC.
Because they weren't getting the funding.
Right, they weren't getting the funding. So they got to make some of their own decisions. And in doing that, we actually, came together quicker. We decided on a program, and now there are other states looking to us and that are excited about what we've done and wanting to know, wow, how did you do that, and how did you do it so quickly and efficiently?
Well, and I think, Angie, so many times the state of Kentucky maybe doesn't have as good of a reputation as we would like as being a leader in some things. It was really nice that in terms of our state, and what our viewers should be proud of, is we are very cutting edge in the treatment of sexual assault and domestic violence, and now we are becoming really positioned nationally as a leader in helping other states develop prevention education programs, which is really what brought you to the table in Frankfort to discuss what you're seeing in the Purchase area, to help other people decide what works in schools and what doesn't work in schools, but beyond schools, what helps us prevent violence. And so Green Dot came up, and it's such a unique term. Can you tell us about the Green Dot program and why the viewer should be looking for it?
The Green Dot program was actually invented by Dr. Dorothy Edwards, who is a professor at the University of Kentucky. So it was developed in our state, and it's based on the bystander model, which what that means is that, if someone is getting hurt, if violence is happening, usually there's someone standing around watching it. Even in school, if a bully is trying to hurt another student, there is someone standing around watching that bully. That's why he's doing it, because he's getting attention.
Right.
The same goes, for domestic violence and sexual violence. It happens, and there are people standing around that usually could have stopped it if they'd only known what to do or how to intervene to stop it. So that's what the Green Dot program is based on. So it's basically saying, well, first of all, I think before you can understand Green Dot, you have to know what a red dot is.
Okay,
and
so what is a red dot?
Dr. Dorothy looks at it like this. A red dot is any person who is acting violently. So that violence may be a husband who's beating his wife. It may be a 3rd grader who's stealing a 1st grader's lunch. It may be that a rapist has just, drugged somebody off the street and raped them, or it may be that, your boyfriend or your husband, is forcing you to have sex with them. Anything like that would be a violent act.
And so it's on the screen for the reader to see what a red dot is, and then also we have, in contrast to that, what a green dot is.
So a green dot is going to be anyone who just basically stands up and says, this is not right, I don't agree with what you're doing, I am not a violent person and I don't want you to be a violent person.
Okay.
So being a green dot is basically just standing up and saying, I'm not going to be a violent person, and I'm going to make sure that other people aren't violent either.
And so that can also, I think what you're also describing, I think that makes this program so unique is it's applicable to younger ages and older ages, so it can be behaviors or attitudes, thought patterns, belief systems that we all hold about these very controversial topics at times, and about these social issues. And so a little one could understand that a green dot is just telling the teacher, where an adult maybe it is intervening on someone's behalf.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so it seems applicable to many populations and age groups.
Yes, it is. I think a lot of it, you have to kind of assess yourself and say, okay, where do I hold power in my life? Am I someone's boss? Could they look up to me? Could they respect me? Could they be following what I'm doing? Am I acting violently? Would that make someone else act violently? Or, if you're a teacher, teachers hold a great deal of leverage, or they have millions of little eyes watching them, and if they see a teacher yell or a teacher act out or a teacher hit when somebody's upset or when something's happened, then the children are going to think it's okay to do that. So with green dot, if you're a teacher, you're basically saying, I'm going to find some way to resolve this problem, and I'm not going to do it by hitting or by yelling or by screaming. And it just depends on the situation you're in, but there's so many different ways you can be a green dot.
Well, and when I hear you say that, I think about sporting events. And how sometimes they're very emotionally charged, and we're certainly not on this program saying if you yell or you holler at a player that means that you're supporting domestic violence or sexual assault. But what this program is saying is doing things in such a way that you begin to reinforce attitudes and behaviors that would not lead in some people's lives to these greater crimes like domestic violence and sexual assault. And so I think I'm thinking about coaches who get angry and get aggressive. What would the prevention program say about that type of behavior?
I think you have to realize there will be aggression and it has its place, and I don't think it's ever right to hurt somebody's self-esteem or to mentally hurt them in a way if you're in that position of authority over them. But I think that you have to learn assertive behaviors. There are other ways that you can let somebody know what they did without yelling, without screaming, without being aggressive. So I would say for someone in that position, they need, they just need to think about some assertive techniques. They need to learn other ways besides yelling and screaming to, we could certainly do a whole show probably on assertive techniques, so I won't list all those for you, but I would say, there's other alternatives.
Sure. So the one project that the state of Kentucky has chosen to be facilitated through rape crisis centers is Green Dot. And you've explained to us what a red dot is, so something that we don't want to be, and a green dot is something that we do want to become. And so the picture that I saw that you showed was a picture of a map with lots and lots of red dots and lots of green dots. And so for the purpose of today's program, would you begin to take us through how people, when they leave the program today, could say, I understand what this prevention program is, and I understand practically how I can begin to be a part of what's becoming a nationwide discussion. How can I be a green dot? Where would you tell them to start?
I think you have to, basically start with, you just kind of have to see, what can I do or what can I do? A lot of people think that it's all about money. They think, if I'm going to help, I have to give a lot of money, I have to be rich, I have to donate all this. And then other people think, I don't have any time. I don't have time to donate to this. I can't go be a volunteer. I can't answer crisis lines. I can't do all this stuff. It's not about time and money. Being a green dot could be something as simple as just putting a link to our rape crisis center on the bottom of your email. That way, every day when you send out an email, you never know who might receive that email that has been sexually abused, and all they needed to see was a link to a website that would get them help. If that happens, you've been a green dot.
Okay. So just some way, small way.
Right.
So one of the things that you brought back and we're educating our staff about and we're educating people about is ways that people could start to think like a green dot. But before we get right to that, what I would like for you to share with the viewer, if you don't mind, is a story that you shared with our staff about doing this work, being around this discussion, and yet you were put in a situation where you didn't feel equipped to respond. And it really brought the Green Dot program home for you. Can you share with us that story?
Absolutely. It was very strange for me because I had actually been in a training. I've been going all week to a training, left the training, and I was in another state when this happened, but I was on my way back here, had stopped at a store, and in the parking lot, I saw this man and woman who were screaming, yelling at each other. It was actually the woman who's being very violent toward the man, and they had a young child. The child probably was about 2 years old, but she was screaming and yelling, and the child was just almost complacent. It was like he had been in that situation so many times that the yelling and screaming didn't even bother him anymore. But here, I'd spent all this time learning about how Green Dot was to kind of intervene and to stop these acts of violence from happening. And I just stood there, and honestly, I didn't do anything. I knew I should have, but I didn't know what to do.
And you had shared with us that this wasn't just your run-of-the-mill argument. This wasn't just stressful trip to whatever store and we're all frustrated.
Okay.
This was, in your opinion, you were expecting at any time people to begin to hit one another or somebody to be hurt.
Yes, it was very, very violent, for what I would consider to be violent. But at any point, I think it could have blown up into a bad situation.
So you're standing there and you're watching it, and you've got all this great training, and so tell me, what was that like for you? What was going through your mind? What were you feeling?
I was very frustrated because I knew that I needed to do something, and I had pledged. And part of the Green Dot program, as we learned how to do that, was we had to pledge that we would be a Green Dot. And so I was frustrated with myself because I didn't know what to do in that situation. So I got in the car and I drove off. And so all the way home, of course, I had that time to reflect and think, what would I have done? What could I have done to make that situation better? And in the end, on the way home, I thought, all I could have done was just walk up to the child and say, oh, you are so cute, what beautiful eyes you have, or just anything to divert the situation and make the parents, first of all, understand that somebody was watching them, that they weren't just alone in that parking lot. And number two, hopefully make them realize that their child was watching them. Their child was seeing and hearing everything that was going on. And, that was something simple. I don't think anybody would have gotten upset for somebody walking by saying, oh, your child is so beautiful. But at the time, I just froze. And so that's part of Green Dot is going to be for me to go into the community and teach people, here's what you can say in this situation, just to help you get started thinking about what can I do.
Well, and I think it's interesting, what we would never want people to do is to put themselves in danger, to be confrontational.
Right.
But like, as you had time to get away from the situation and reflect, you thought, if I could have just intervened for the child, just acknowledged the child, maybe I could have stopped something. You share with the staff that it had become textbook knowledge that you had had until that point, and then you realized you were a bystander and you didn't know what to do. Do you think, given your experience and the people that you speak with and that you train under and that you present on behalf of, do you think that is the reason for the bystander idea, that I'm not going to intervene, not so much that people don't care, but that they don't know how, or that they get afraid?
Absolutely. I think a lot of people number one, they're afraid they're going to get hurt. You don't want to get into a situation like that's already volatile, and you don't want you to come out physically hurt as well as whatever might have been going on in the situation. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to think about, well, it's not my business. Why should I get in the middle of what's going on with someone else? When really we should be thinking, how can I help someone else? It's really going to be a shift in our way of thinking.
Well, if you were going to answer that question for me, for our viewers, why should we? Life is busy. We have our own problems. We have our own demands. Why should we get involved in other people's issues?
Well, answering it from the standpoint of the Director of Education for a Rape Crisis Center, our statistics need to come down. It's really a problem in our area. And if we, the bystanders, the public, can step into these situations And we don't know. I mean, if you walk by, you don't know how many times that person may get hurt, may be raped, may be assaulted. But if you stop that one time and, you know, try to stop the perpetrator, try to help that person out of the situation, that may be all it takes to keep that person from getting repeatedly hurt. And I think the what if is a good enough reason to stop and help people. If you have to leave that situation and think, I wonder what would have happened if I would have said something. I wonder what would happen, you know, if I had done this. And
is that what happened to you when you drove away on the way home? Did you ask yourself, what if?
Yeah, all the way home. And I just played it over and over in my mind. What if I had done this? What if I had done that? You know, and I mean, I'll never see those people again. And for all I know right now, that child may be in danger. And it may have just taken the one time for me to say something to stop that. And so I still ask myself, what if? And I think that ought to be a reason enough for anybody to learn what to do, to learn how to intervene, to learn how to get in this situation and try to make it better.
Well, you mentioned the statistics need to come down, and one of my jobs is to look at the year in numbers and where we were last year as compared to where we were the year before. And every single service that the Purchase Area Sexual Assault Center has provided has gone up. Last year alone, we served 604 new bodies, whether it was, I think it was 400 primary victims, people that were actually victimized, and then 204 family members or friends. And so that doesn't count the ones that we have been serving and continue to provide service to. Those were new people that have been affected by sexual violence. Do you think that number is shocking?
Oh, I think it's very shocking, especially for people who don't work in this every day. You just don't understand how prevalent it really is. You know, I think in the back of our minds, people think, oh, it happens, but not to anyone I know. And that's really not true. I know last year, just in the education department, we saw almost 13,000 students in classrooms, and the more schools we went in, the more time we spent in there, you see sexual harassment, you see bullying, you see all these problems. And, you know, I think the general public just doesn't know what it's like to be a teenage child, or what it's like to be harassed in this way. And yeah, the numbers are shocking.
Well, you talk about, you know, the education department, so let's kind of come back there. We're at the beginning of a new school year. We've got this prevention campaign that the state of Kentucky is working to launch, and really this is a trial run for a year to see how this goes. Like you said, it was kind of born and bred here in Kentucky at the University of Kentucky. And so as the school year is getting ready to kick off, how would you have folks, parents, teenagers, whoever might be watching this program or have influence over somebody else in their life, how would you encourage them to start thinking like a green dot?
Basically what you need to do is decide, and it can be a simple little thing, just decide, you know, if it were me in that situation, if I were the one that were being hurt, what would I want someone else to do for me? You know, how would I want to get that information? And it can be so different. You know, if you're a business owner, we want you to be a green dot safe place. And basically all that means is that you're going to put a sign in your window with a green dot on it. And if someone were hurt, they would know they could come to you. And all you would do is maybe keep brochures to the Rape Crisis Center in your you know, in your building somewhere. So if people came in with questions, you know, if they saw that green dot, they knew you were a green dot safe place, they could come to you and say, where do I get help? I need help.
Well, one of the things that you had shared with me, Angie, and what we've put on the screen for the viewer is to start asking questions like, what are their skills and their talents? Why would that be an important place for people to start? Why would it be important for me to be able to answer that question for myself in relation to Green Dot?
Because I think you have to start with, what am I good at, before you can say, here's how I'm going to help you. You know, if you didn't know anything about basketball or didn't like basketball, I think it would be a hard place for you to go work on the basketball team or work with the basketball team trying to help or teach them, you know. But if you were really good musically, maybe we would want to put you in the band to work with those students and try to teach them, you know, or try to work with them. So you have to think about up front, what am I good at? Where are my talents going to best be used in this process? You know, if you are a shy, timid person, we're probably not going to teach you techniques to intervene, because that's going to be really hard for you. If you don't, if you don't talk, you know, if you don't converse well with people in the first place, it's probably going to be hard to teach you techniques to intervene in the middle of a situation. So we're going to try to tailor that. You need to think about, what am I really good at, to tailor how you're going to be a green dot.
So I think that's really important for many reasons. Angie, when you talk about that, and I haven't ever thought about it from that angle, but some people might immediately shut down and say, I can never intervene, I can never be a part of this, because this is not, I would never have even approached the child to say, your child is beautiful, or you're beautiful. I never would do that. But if I'm already assessing what am I good at, then I can begin to be creative about what my role is. And you talk about tagging something on your email. That is very passive. It's important, but it's not right out there. You know.
Exactly.
You also talk about asking the question, what positions of authority do I hold? Some people may say, I don't hold any authority. What would you say to that?
Well, I think you do. I think if you have children, you're in authority over those children. You know, you can teach them nonviolent behaviors. That's being a green dot. You know, I think everybody is going to have that position at some point. You just may not think of it as having an authority position. I mean, if you teach a Sunday school class, you're in authority over those children. You know, authority kind of sounds like this mean, harsh word, but that's not what that's not what it is. It just means that basically you're in a situation where you're telling you have the authority to tell other people what they're supposed to be doing at that point, where they're supposed to be, you know, things that are going to keep them safe while they're there with you.
Well, even just a sphere of influence. You have some sort of influence over them in some way.
Yes.
And we've seen at our center, and of course, anyone that turns on the television these days sees how oftentimes authority can be misused. And what a great contrast to that you could use your authority to begin to explain Green Dot. And I was laughing when I first heard the title, because I thought, well, what does that even mean? But that's just it. It's intriguing enough to cause you to ask more. It's simple enough for a child to learn, and it's complex enough for an adult to be able to elaborate on and apply to very different areas of their lives. So for those that might be in a position of authority, you mentioned a business owner, you mentioned a Sunday school class, you mentioned a parent. How might the captain of a volleyball team take Green Dot to the volleyball team?
I'll tell you one way this has worked for me, and I know it would work in any kind of sports situation, but over the past year of learning about Green Dot and incorporating Green Dot, I have picked up many t-shirts that have a big green dot on them, or they say, I'm a green dot, or what is a green dot? You know, if I were a coach, I would wear that t-shirt to practice. And I can promise you that someone would walk up to you and say, what's a green dot? There's your opportunity. When you explain to them what it is, when you explain to them that you don't stand for violence, you've been a green dot.
I see.
So it's as simple as that.
It's just saying what you believe and what you stand or don't stand for.
Yes.
One of the ideas that we had heard, you talked about parents being in a position of authority over their children, was even rewarding kids with Green Dot stickers, or doing something on the refrigerator, just some way to let the child buy into the fact that we have a responsibility to make this world a safer place. And we start in our own home, and in our own neighborhood, in our own church, in our own school, because we have influence there, and we've been placed there for a reason. And so position of authority, excellent and very important. The next one I thought was very, very interesting, and about how it might lead to a Green Dot moment, as we call them at the center, which is, who likes and respects me? Why is that an important question?
Because if people like you and respect you, many times they want to be like you. They're going to strive to make sure that what they're doing is in line with something that you would do. So this is a great one for teachers, because they have so many little people that like them and respect them. So they have a great chance to teach people to be a green dot just by their actions. A lot of times they don't even have to say anything. It could just be, by the way they are interacting with their students. It can be anyone, it can be your fellow coworkers. If they like you and they respect you, then just by watching you and watching how you react to situations, do you do that violently? Do you stand for violence? Do you laugh at the dirty joke that's being told in the break room? If you just stand back and say, I'm not down with that,
I'm not
you've been a green dot.
Okay.
So
one of the things that just amazed me about the education department. Obviously, I work with you and the part-time educator Maxie, every day. But one of the things that Maxie described, the part-time educator who often works in the elementary schools, she came back and talked about the fact that one of the children was bullying another child, and her skill to turn to the one that's doing the bullying, and she used this one, that he had leadership qualities. He had influence, and he was using that in the negative way. And she, because it was a young child, she used that opportunity not to be punitive to that child, but to teach that child what influence can do and what a difference it made in the life of that child. And I thought that was so interesting to begin to talk to kids about who likes you, who respects you, and that is influence, and using that in a positive way.
I don't think we give children enough credit at all. Even at 6 or 7, they're old enough to understand what you're telling them. They're old enough to understand right from wrong. And just to sit down and have that conversation with the bully and say, you know, kids are following what you do. Kids are watching you. You know, do you want them to watch you in a bad way, or do you want them to watch you in a good way? And they're old enough to understand good and bad. So it's a very easy conversation to have with the child.
Yes. The last one that you have in terms of teaching people to start thinking like a green dot is, what resources can I access? Tell me about that.
I think it's basically who, you know, if you have a rich uncle who would like to donate money to the Rape Crisis Center, absolutely, be a green dot that way. You know, if you are retired and you have time on your hands, absolutely be a green dot that way. You know, you can volunteer for to be a hospital, go on calls to the hospital, or take the crisis phone. But you have to think, you know, what resources do I have? If I don't have money and I don't have time, what do I have? Do I have some extra pencils or paper that I can have the rape crisis number put on? Do I have, you know, what do I have that I can hang or wear or show in my window, or you know, what can I do? What resources do I have that a green dot can be put on, or that I can let someone else know that I am a green dot?
Well, and I love the idea about the business, because business, meaning any kind of business, can put a green dot in their window, put a green dot in their display counter, just to let people know, if you are a survivor or a victim of sexual violence, we're here to help you if you need us. If you want to know more, let us tell you. If nothing else, it's saying we don't tolerate violence in the workplace. And what a statement for employees.
And there doesn't have to be a lot of training with that. I mean, it's just basically saying, you know, if I'm a victim and I see a green dot and I go into that store because there's a green dot in the window, the person in that store doesn't have to have, they don't have to be a therapist. They don't have to be trained. All they have to know is, I know who to call.
Right.
You know, it doesn't have to be this great deal of training. You don't have to have a lot of knowledge to let someone know, you know, I don't stand for violence and I'm going to help you get the help you need.
Well, and I think on that note is a perfect note for us to end. That was excellent. And thank you so much for joining us for the Purchase Area Sexual Assault Center show, Rays of Hope. I hope that you've come away today with some ideas about how you can begin to make a difference. And we hope to challenge you many times from this point forward on how you can become a green dot for our community.